would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to a brand new, shiny week, everyone. I hope you're ready to take it on, and hopefully, with a little luck, we'll be exploring some of the topics that help you imagine an even greater goal for yourself by the end of the week. Or at least arm you to make better decisions as you move forward with your real estate goals. That's always what we want to do, right? Now, before we get into it, let me just remind everyone how to get in touch. The absolute best way to do that is through the website at www.therebelbroker.com. From there, you can reach out. Just click on the contacts link in the menu bar. From there, you can send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions you might have. Also, going to be reaching out to the person who got the drawing. I didn't actually end up emailing the person whose name I drew on Friday. We did do the drawing for the $50 Amazon gift card, which we've been doing every month to the tune of $50 a pop, which so far I think we've given out between $500 and $600. I'm not 100% sure where we are right now. So I'll be reaching out to that person today. So look for in your email inboxes. For those of you who did, go ahead and click the big red button at the top of the site titled Take the Survey to Support the Show. The site I'm talking about, of course, is therebelbroker.com. If you missed it this time, don't worry. We're going to be doing it again at the beginning of September. Just go to the website, therebelbroker.com, go to the very tippy top, click the big red button that says Take the Survey to Support the Show. Provide your email address, answer a handful of demographic questions, and you're entered. And good luck to you, and congrats to the folks who've already won. And I'm looking forward to hearing back from the person who I drew Friday night. We have interesting things going on. One other thing I want to let everyone know is I resent some content to the members of the Rebel Underground. I've noticed that there was a glitch where some folks who registered would not get the welcome email that gave you a link to the existing content for Rebel Underground. I apologize for that. So what I did was resend a page to everyone that would give you access to that content. Moving forward, I'll continue to obviously just send out the content as it's created. I'm also working on a centralized page where members will be able to log in and access everything that's available so that it's not something you just get through the mailer. Of course, that also means creating the page, creating the access, and all that kind of stuff. And I want to make it as simple as possible for folks. And usually that means making it invisible to you in terms of just simply being able to access it. And I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. So I'm trying to think my way through it, but it's in the planning stage. So hopefully we'll have that update for you soon. I have a lot of stuff to share with you in today's show. My weekend was absolutely packed with stuff. And probably a couple of real practical ground truth things that we can share. Now, as a lot of you know, I have been in the process of preparing my home for sale, and the plan was to sell it or to put it on the market several months ago. I encountered problems that were related to family style stuff. The contractor I want to use is my brother-in-law, and he was doing work for my mother, and I didn't feel right going out and finding a different contractor for a variety of reasons, not just relating to cost, but, if I figure if I'm going to spend the money, I'd rather spend it on a family member than someone I don't know. And that turned into a huge complication. Literally 6 months ago was the scheduled time for us to start doing the work on my place. And here we are 6 months in, and I guess it's like every other contractor. I guess my brother-in-law is no different from any other contractor. When you ask him for an estimate of time for anything, it's always 2 to 3 weeks. So 6 months ago, when I asked my brother-in-law, hey, what's your schedule looking like? When can you start on my place? I think he gave me, I think instead of saying 2 to 3 weeks, he said 3 to 4 weeks, so like a month. So I said, great. So I got everything going, timed everything perfectly so that things would be ready for him at that point. And then he wasn't able to come because he wasn't done with the stuff at my mother's house, which stretched out and stretched out and stretched out. And he had a few medical problems and some bad things happened. So, and I just adjusted my strategy and actually came to the conclusion once we hit the date I had originally wanted to go on the market, and I had picked that date because statistically it was the time of year when you tend to get the most over asking the fastest. And what I found was that despite the fact I missed that date, every single month since then, I have seen dramatic increases in my property value. Now, if we just go off of what the folks at Zillow have to say, and Zillow's not always right, but Zillow, in terms of their calculations of increases, now their initial number may be wrong, but if they're telling you each month that there's been an increase in the property value of your home, you can guess that that is true. And you can usually take the percentage that they estimate, and it's usually within a decent ballpark because they're basing that on recent solds that are comparable to yours. And the last month, I literally just opened the email 30 minutes ago, and it was telling me that in the last 30 days, the value of my home has gone up $20,000. It's told me numbers like that just about every single month since. So the math has now overwhelmed whatever I would have gotten when I originally was going to list it. So I don't feel too bad about it, but I do feel like there's a hard deadline. I feel like October is when this needs to be closed by. So that means moving very quickly. That means getting something done within the next couple of weeks. The good news is I had finally had him out to do the bare minimum. I had a laundry list of things I wanted him to do, and as we've been stretching the time, I'm not a guy with a lot of time, frankly, to do a lot of different things other than the stuff that we talk about, real estate and that kind of stuff. But I've been slowly but surely tackling each one of these things over time, and really it boiled down to me just needing him to do a handful of things. The most important of which I can't market the house until it's done, is to reconnect the cooktop in the kitchen to gas. Now, it originally was an electrical cooktop. Of course, if you're doing a remodel of your kitchen, I always suggest going to gas. Gas is simply more desirable, and that's what I decided to do. So the old cooktop is torn out already. When I got the new countertops put in and I got the new cabinets done, part of the whole process was cutting the hole for the new cooktop, and I didn't want them to cut the hole for the old cooktop. So I bought the gas cooktop. The gas cooktop is sitting in there unconnected to gas or electric. So that was what I was going to have him do. And it was a good bang for the buck because the estimates I had gotten for that work were way higher what he was willing to do the work for. So there was that equation in there as well. Came over last weekend to do it, got about 80 to 90% of the way through the job, and actually took care of a couple of other things that were on the list that he rated as easier. So he wanted to do those first, get the low-hanging fruit finished. He did that. Very happy with that work. But he didn't finish the most critical one, which was the hookup of the gas. That work is about 80% done. Then another medical issue crops up on Thursday, and he's unable to return. He had planned to return on Saturday to finish the work, but he was out for medical reasons. So I'm still blocked on that and consider myself blocked. But in the meantime, I've tackled these other things. I've done some repainting. And you know how I had originally said that if I had to redo my decision on my kitchen, I wouldn't have gone with a white outside surfacing because the cabinets inside were a dark brown. Well, and I was resisting having to go to the trouble of painting. I had tried painting one manually just with a brush, and it was taking forever because I'm a little bit anal retentive. So if I can see any streaks of the dark stuff below, I have to repaint the whole thing. I have to do another coat. And I finally decided, screw this. It's worth it for me to purchase a spray painter and do the work that way and see what happens. But even just as a gamble. So I ended up purchasing a Wagner something 590 off Amazon. I can put a link to it if you like in the show notes. And what had been taking me, because I'd have to paint, wait for it to dry, do another coat, wait for it to dry. I was finding that in this one cabinet, I had to do 4 coats in order to get the coverage that came close to the coverage I wanted. But even then, even after that 4th coat, I could still see little places where it was a little bit too dark. This thing arrived on Friday, pulled it out, loaded it up with paint, repainted the inside of the one I'd been doing by hand all this time, and in one coat with the airless spray painter, it looked fantastic. Smooth. You couldn't see the lines, the brush strokes. You couldn't see any of it. And I was in love with the thing. Over the next hour and a half, I was able to complete the painting process of all my remaining kitchen cabinets. And it basically turned what would have been several more weekends stacked together, redoing the same paint job over and over again in different coats, and compressed it into 2 hours on Saturday. If you have any kind of painting to do, let me just suggest you get one of these things. I think I paid $140, $150 for the thing. I think it actually was less than that. And in terms of the time it saved me alone, it's already paid for itself. Absolutely ridiculous payoff. And now as I look at it as a completed project, it is exactly what I hoped it would be. My kitchen is now a check mark. It is done in terms of attractiveness and how much appeal I think it's going to have for potential buyers. And I managed to, if I had hired someone to come in and do that painting, I'm sure they would have charged me several $100, $300, $400, $500, if not more. Bought the piece of equipment, and I can now use this equipment on other things. And it's great. It's been an awesome, awesome tool for me to use in achieving the goals that I had set. And what's great, these other cabinets, not multiple coats, I was able to handle the whole thing, one coat in each cabinet, and it was just done. You have to go back with a paintbrush and do the edges, right? Because it's a sprayer thing, so you don't want to do overspray and spray areas you don't want. You leave sort of a margin around the edges, and you finish that with the paintbrush. And that was another hour and a half process after that. So in a grand total of about 4 or 5 hours. Amazing. Okay. So that's where we stand. And there's still another door that I want to replace, a back door that I'd like to replace, but that's really it. The rest of it is maybe some touch-up painting in a few places. The house has been victimized by 4 growing boys, so there are different spots on the wall that I'd like to take up, particularly going up the stairs that's very visible. So the more obvious places I want to do some touch-up painting, but that's really it. So as soon as I get this kitchen situation squared away with the cooktop, I'm ready to go, and we can see where the marketing goes. And if all the numbers are as I'm seeing from Zillow and as I'm seeing from the general market activity in Morgan Hill, I should do very well. And we can use that as a learning experience as I go through that. All right, so that's the update on the house. God, was there anything else? I can't help but feeling like the only thing I can suggest is if you are in one of those situations where you're dealing with a color differential, do take the trouble, particularly if you're doing white, don't paint the shelves. Just go down to your local lumber place and give them dimensions of your existing shelves and have them give you new shelves that are already white, that are that melamine material. I almost decided I was going to use my magical painter on those shelves, decided to just get new shelves. Amazingly awesome decision. It looks so good. Maybe I'll put a picture of it up on Pinterest. All right, let's go ahead and jump in to some other interesting stuff. Now, this is from our old buddy, Scott Blasius. He's a real estate agent in Sacramento that we've talked with quite a bit. He's with McKiernan Realty in Sacramento. So if you're looking for a good real estate agent in Sacramento, get in touch with him. He forwarded me a message that he got, and it kind of blows me away. And as soon as he sent it to me, I knew I had to share it with you here. So we're going to go ahead and cover that in a minute, but don't go away. We'll do it right after this break, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right. Aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We just kind of went through the update on what's going on my own real estate efforts in terms of selling my property. I'm actually super excited to go to the next level with that, because the next step is going to be it gets sold. I take that money and I actually don't buy, unless I can find a ridiculous deal right now, which isn't likely. It would have to be a ridiculous deal, to be honest with you. I'm not going to purchase a new home for myself. I'm going to rent. I'm putting my money where my mouth is and betting that we are going to see a downturn within the next year or so, or at least enough of a slowdown that I can spend my money better for my own purchase later rather than now. So I'm bucking the trend of what's being sold by the most popular news outlets as it relates to real estate, that, hey, this market's just going to go boom, 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 and we're going to see all these increases. I don't subscribe to that. I've shared with you the reasons why. If you've been listening for longer than a week, you've probably already noted all of those reasons. And so I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I will eat my words, and we'll see where we go after that. But the plan is to take that money, take a certain amount and put it aside to be used for the purchase of my new home. I do absolutely want to purchase another home for myself at some point, just betting that it's going to be better to do that later than sooner. Take the remaining proceeds and actually invest in other markets. Now, what's super sexy about that is I'll actually have the resources to go off and go to different places and let those be learning experiences for all of us, because I'm very interested in places like Tennessee. There's actually a couple of different communities. I like Chattanooga. I like Memphis. But we're going to go ahead and look at different areas and figure out what makes sense. And it'll be great. I can give you ground truth. I'll go to these places. I'll look at properties. And if I decide not to, it'll be because the numbers say not to. And we'll go through those numbers, and I'll take you right along with me on that trip. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in. As I mentioned, email from Scott Blasius, a longtime listener who's interacted with me a lot. He shares tons of articles with me. We have some awesome conversations back and forth via email about real estate and where things are going and where we think they're going. And sometimes he disagrees with me, sometimes he agrees, but we have great conversations. The kind of conversations grown-ups should have, right? Because it's all based just on data, and that's really kind of where each of us goes. He sent a message to me on the 11th, so last week. He goes, "Hey, Robert, I heard on your show today your discussion about lenders loosening requirements. Check out the email conversation below I had with a lender who sent me an email along those lines and my response back to him." He refers to it as absolutely pathetic. I want to go ahead and share this with you. I'm going to read it to you just straight up, because this is mind-numbing and annoying. Here's the email. "Great news! We as a company have decided to start approving FHA loans for borrowers with credit scores as low as 580. Loans up to $488,750. Low as 580. In today's world, that 580 is a very, very low number. It's not the same number that it was 3-4 years ago. Folks who have a 580 score today, if you looked at if they had changed nothing, if their credit, the way they're handling their debts and all these kinds of things were exactly the same today as they were 3 years ago, their credit rating 3 years ago would probably be lower. And given what I've heard in terms of how much lower, it could be a substantial amount. It could be as much as down to below 500. But from what I'm hearing from a lot of folks in the lending industry, their credit rating would be more like 540, 530. with the exact same credit profile or debt profile that they had 3 years ago, their credit rating would have been substantially lower. All right, so that's the first thing to wrap your head around. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about, I'm referring to the artificial increase in credit scores by ignoring elements that normally reduce your credit score, but significantly. For instance, in July of this year, they stopped tracking medical judgments against you and other civil judgments against you as something they're not including in your credit profile. That is a big, big deal. Many thousands of people suddenly have a gigantic increase in their credit rating because this stuff is being ignored. And the reason given was because also there's a phenomenon where these tend to be inaccurate reportings. Well, the solution to that problem is not to stop reporting them or to stop tracking them. It's to create a process of verification, right? If someone doesn't pay a medical bill and really didn't pay it, or doesn't pay a judgment and really didn't pay it, the solution to tracking that isn't ignore it. The solution to tracking that is have a process where you verify whether or not that amount's actually been paid. If the borrower says, I paid it, here's who I paid, well, then there should be a process to go and verify they did that. And if they can't verify that they did that, or they can't show documentation they paid it, like a canceled check or whatever, that should stay on their credit rating. Bottom line, those are real credit facts. That is actual data that reflects someone's ability to repay a loan and responsibility to own that responsibility and repay a loan. Now, that alone should make you worried about these numbers, but there's all kinds of other stuff. Now, in addition to just forgetting about these debts, there's also now, which happened within the last year, this process where now previously, if you didn't get credit or positive credit score credit for paying your power bill or your phone bill or your water bill, well, now you get positive influence on your credit rating for that when you shouldn't, because it's not an article of credit, right? They're not loaning you money. They're providing a service, and if you stop paying for that service, they turn it off. So there's this whole process now where they're doing alternative credit scoring. Go ahead and Google that, alternative credit scores. It's basically a creative way of saying artificially boosting someone's credit score. And don't have any illusions. The only segment of potential buyers out there that these changes are aimed at are subprime borrowers, folks who would not normally qualify to borrow. That is it. There is no other way to look at it. Okay? All right, so this email goes on. Additional requirements over FHA loans with greater than 600 credit scores. 1, must prove a 12-month housing payment history with no late payments. 2, can't have any judgments, tax liens, or collections over $1,000 in the last year except for medical, right? And they're specifically saying except for medical because that's now ignored as of July. 3rd, must have 2 months of house payments in reserves. So they want you to have a certain amount of cash. Now, before you say, oh, well, that's great, 2 months of house payments in reserves. Well, don't get too excited. There was a time when high-risk folks had to have 12 months of payments in reserves. So everything is being reduced in terms of standards. And this lender is celebrating that fact and pushing that fact and reaching out. Now, here was Scott's response. Now, Scott did not specifically tell me. I'm not going to share the name of this lender, by the way. Because I'll tell you what, this, and because of who they're doing this from, right? They're talking about this being an FHA loan. So the folks on the hook, once this thing is done being underwritten, is you, right? If this loan gets underwritten and it gets funded, and then the borrower defaults on it, you're on the hook because you're a taxpayer, and that's exactly what this loan is. It's a taxpayer-backed mortgage loan. Now, so that's the details of what they're pushing. This is what a lender in Northern California, in Sacramento, is pushing. Okay? Now, Scott, being a rabble rouser and a great rebel real estate agent out there, replies with this. No disrespect. I love this because this is exactly the same kind of thing I'd say. I might have been more subtly insulting, but he goes just fine with it. No disrespect, but how could this possibly be a good thing? Just more fuel to the fire to help lead up to the same type of scenario we did 10 years ago. Between you and me, we don't need more buyers in the pool. We need more sellers in a position to be able to sell to even out supply demand. Just my 2 cents. Have a great weekend and best of luck in your business. The response is awesome. Thanks, Scott. Good points. Have a great weekend. That's it. That is the extent of this lender's response. And here's why. Here's why this lender is super excited about super low credit scores getting money and being so dismissive of the concerns of someone who very logically replied with, tell me how this is a good thing. And he really gives them nothing. Just as good points, get out of my way. And it all comes down to a philosophy I think we've been dancing around for a long time. I'm almost sure I've said this outright, but it's really a follow the money strategy. Whenever you're looking at actions, right? And I hit on this last week. Banks are not in the business to help you. The stuff they do may help you, and I'm sure there are individuals in the banking industry who handle loans who honestly want to run the way they do things in a way that really does help people. And if you're a loan person that actually will sit down and say with someone, hey, you know what, you could qualify for this amount of money, and it makes me more money if you borrow more money. But I'm going to be really super honest with you. I think you should not borrow to the max. I think you should constrain your purchasing down to this price point just so that you have some breathing room. If you are a lender like that, I love you. You're the same kind of lender I am as a real estate person. You're absolutely worrying about the best interests of your client and trying to let the benefit of your experience speak to them. So good on you. So am I talking about you specifically? No. Is what I'm about to say probably relate to an awful lot of people you work with? Yeah. To your bosses? Yeah. To your boss's bosses? Yeah. Follow the money. Whatever makes more money for whoever is involved is more often than not going to be the decision that gets made. We talked about how that works for the banking world in general. Banks make money by lending money. They do not give a crap about whether or not it's a high-risk loan, and here is why. We have eliminated the concept of risk from banking. The people who take the risk in banking are not the banks. It is you, the taxpayer. The banks simply make sure to only create loans that will meet the criteria to get sold to a government-sponsored entity. Translation, government-sponsored entity equals taxpayers take the risk. So once it's underwritten, they're able to sell it on the secondary market to Fannie, Freddie, whoever. And that's it. If there's a default, you own it. That's why we had to do all those crazy bailouts for Fannie and Freddie and had to put them under conservatorship and make them under the more direct control of the government. Now, I think it's comical that we think somehow putting them more under the direct control of the government, quote unquote, fixes them. But that's a topic for another time. But the bottom line here is the reason why everyone wants to go for this and the reason why everyone's A-okay with this is because they don't think about it too much. They don't want to actually think about what would solve the problem. Because as Scott so rightly points out, the solution to the problem is supply. The problem is in the supply. But the banking industry is the monolith. The banking industry, and I've mentioned this before, plays such a huge part in politics that the politicians are all out to make sure that they are maintained and kept running well. So all of the solutions are going to try to facilitate more people borrowing money because then the banks make money. The banks will, here's the thing, on the stupidest loan you can imagine, the bank is not taking a risk. As long as the bank checks the check boxes to sell that loan to a government-sponsored entity, also known as you, the taxpayer, they don't care. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'd love to see if banks were held to the standard of simply owning their own loans And I actually have a lot of respect for banks that do that. So I realize what I'm saying here sounds like an indictment of all banks. There are plenty of banks out there that actually underwrite a huge number of loans that they hold on to. I don't know if this is still true, but when I was chatting with Quicken Loans about their lending practices, they do now not their 1% down. They had that bizarre 1% down thing that they were selling on the secondary market. But I know that when you go for a lot of their conventional loans that they fund, they hold on to those. They don't sell them. In fact, they even have one program where you can do a readjustment for free of the loan balance later. So let's say you expected to get a large sum of money for some reason later on, or let's say you wanted to buy a house before you sold your current house, right? That was a strategy I was considering doing. For up to a year after, they would let me do that, and actually there would be no cost to it. It would simply be me dropping an amount of money into it to reduce the balance, and they'd recalculate the payment and all that other kind of stuff. And the idea there being, I was simply going to buy a home that met my needs when I found it, rather than worry about my house, and I was able to qualify for that. Didn't end up being a strategy I went with, but it was there, and I was reassured that, because a lot of other folks I was talking to don't, they sell it immediately. And Quicken was telling me, no, we tend to hold on to our loans of this type. So I thought that was a good thing. But I found this to be extremely interesting and disquieting. It is now such a common thing that lenders are marketing to real estate people with this as a good thing. So just more evidence that the lending landscape that we've covered for so long is indeed scary as all get out. All right, let me go ahead and cover a few other little topics. These were some little tidbits I put off to the side. I wanted to talk a little bit about public pensions. I had some folks asking me about my assertion the other day that pensions were averaging 0.7% instead of the 7 point something percent that they assume when they're investing to stay profitable. That number is actually 0.6% return in 2016, despite a 7.6% assumption on the part of pensions. This is another nail in the coffin of our worries about a pension problem. And if there is a pension problem, that will equal an inflation problem for us, because the solution that will be implemented will be printing more money, which goes directly into the hands of people who will immediately spend it. And that is how you get dramatic increases in inflation. We talked about this last week. It's higher velocity money, because it simply goes out and immediately goes into the spending pool. Whereas last time, all of this money that was printed went to banks and tended to be used for large purchases like a home. So it didn't go into the hands of individuals who are going to use it to buy bread and cheese and milk and all this other stuff. It went straight into the hands of another bank. So it was digital money that never became a dollar in your pocket, and it just moved around. Pensions equals a different kind of money printing. It means it's money that goes directly into an individual's account that then gets used and spent immediately, and that equals much higher inflation. Next, some of these are, we could almost do shows on each one of these. The next one is U.S. credit card debt surpasses financial crisis history, or financial crisis record. Student and auto loans hit new all-time highs. This is a very dubious distinction. The article starts off, who would have expected that today's otherwise boring monthly consumer credit report would be the day's most exciting event? The monthly update from the Federal Reserve confirmed that as of the end of June, total revolving, i.e. credit card credit, rose to $1,021.7 billion, which is a trillion, right? Isn't that a trillion? An increase of $4.1 billion on the month, and a new all-time high, taking out the previous record high set during the summer of 2008. Coupled with the monthly $8.3 billion increase in non-revolving credit, which also rose to an all-time high of $2,834.1 billion, means that total consumer credit in June increased $12.4 billion, slightly less than the $13.9 billion expected, and modestly less than the $18.4 billion increase in May, to $3,855.8 billion, also a record high. So on every corner of indebtedness, we are at peaks. A closer look at quarterly update in non-revolving debt, we find that for another consecutive quarter, both student and auto loans hit record highs. 1.45 trillion and 1.131 trillion respectively, although there does appear to be a modest slowdown in credit issuance for these two largest categories. A slowdown in the increase, not a reversal. It's still increasing. It's just not increasing at the same rate we've seen historically. I actually would expect that once we see a peak and start to see this decline, I don't think that's necessarily a piece of good news. I think that represents an element of fear that we'd want to watch. Finally, one other very local thing for the real estate market here in the Bay Area. Now, I've had some folks tell me they're not seeing the same kind of things I'm seeing, but I wanted to share this. The last time we spoke about this was 6 months ago. To buy a median-priced home 6 months ago, I believe we talked about this 6 months ago, I think it was January, you needed a household income of $152,000 a year in order to do that. Now, that household income needs to be over $179,000. But the housing problem is now a statewide problem, not just a Bay Area problem. Just absolutely crazy. Let's see here. While that 179,000, I wanted to give you some specifics in some specific counties, because I think looking at those numbers is interesting. While that 179,390 might get you something in Alameda County, where the median home price is $880,000, or Solano County, where $412,000 is the average, it's not likely to get you anything in San Francisco, where the average home price is $1,450,000, San Mateo County, where the average is $1,469,000, or Santa Clara County, where the average is $1,183,440. So just crazy. The numbers are insane. Yeah. So I don't see a bright, shiny future here for a lot of this. And remember, whenever you start to see home prices completely out of whack with wage earning, right? With what people are earning, there is no place to go but down. So I'm pretty confident in my estimation. I think selling and holding onto a rental property until things come back down is a good strategy. Again, we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is on that one, and we'll see how it goes. I certainly do hope that we have left a lot of interesting value for you on the table in today's show. I think you've got a lot of interesting things to think about and things to consider. So please let those bounce around in your head. And I definitely am shooting for this show to have left you with far more value than the time that you invested to listen. So I hope that you feel the same. Thanks again for listening, everyone. I'll talk to you all next time.